Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to The Grid. I'm Joel, aka The Blurred Grammar, and this is a breakdown of Marvel Studios' Werewolf by Night. This is a story that doubles down on classic horror, introducing new characters, specifically monsters in this case, and this was crafted by the director with wonderful cinematography, a bunch of scenes that don't cut, which is something that the Marvel universe is known for, and a bunch of different things that you probably weren't looking for or just missed altogether. So let's go shot by shot, frame by frame, and look at all the things that you may have missed. Spoiler alert here, and let's get right into it. We open with a special presentation bumper with the same style, look, and feel from the 1973 CBS special presentation, which also has basically the same sound as well, because the director was also the composer for this as well, and he is heavily influenced for this project by that 1973 special presentation feel. And he has been making the fanfare for the Marvel marquee from at least 2016, the Doctor Strange, or at least the first Doctor Strange 2016 movie. And if you pay close attention, you'll also hear that there's a slight nod to the bongos from the 1973 feel as well inside of the score for this bump. As the marquee starts, we are then interrupted by a werewolf slash, which is also you pay close attention, is actually on the upswing of dun 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 dun. When we get to that part, we then are removing that and everything turns black and white after that. Also something to note here that there are 4 slashes, not 3, specifically because that is only reserved for a specific character that we should be seeing in the MCU very soon. Moon Knight has now been replaced inside of the R and the curvature of the R, where we used to see Rocket and Bucky because, you know, spooky season and all that kind of stuff. We then end the fanfare with a male choir and then a female choir, both transitioning between each other. Kind of coincides with the way that Jack and Elsa are equal. We then are greeted with the title card for Werewolf by Night, and the look and feel are basically on par with the 1933 King Kong and 1941 The Wolfman, which heavily influenced this movie. We also can see that there's a Roman numeral year for the copyright instead of the actual year for that particular. So instead of 2022, we actually get a Roman numeral for 2022. And this is a nod to the way that 1930s and 40s movies did all their copyrights for those times. We then open with a photo of the original Big Six Avengers.
The known universe, with its heroes and marvels. But what of the darkness?
And the narrator who is narrating this, voice actor Rick Reiserman, was also the voice actor for Thor in the animated series Earth's Mightiest Hero. Under the photo, we see an image of a goblin with a weird Roman numeral and Latin wording, which translated means a winged monster by virtue and piety, effectively and ominously corrupted, or loosely translated that. Could this possibly be the first early sighting of a vampire from ancient years? As we're looking through these images that show up on the screen in the beginning of this film, it's assume that we're looking through Ulysses' journal or something of that nature, which is possibly a catalog of all the monsters that he's fought over the tenure of his life. One of these monsters actually looks like Sasquatch, and actually it is, because under the picture there's a caption that says Ulysses Bloodstone fights a Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot in British Columbia. The MCU is using this to add a sort of origin, or maybe an origin story, to where monsters come from inside of the MCU, because we know that monsters are inside of Marvel Comics with Werewolf by Night, obviously, and then there's vampires as well, Midnight Suns and all that kind of stuff. But in the MCU, we have to give them some type of backstory. And this is the way or the feel that we're trying to go with. At least that's what it looks like. Ulysses Bloodstone first appeared in 1975 and then later appearing in a 2005 comic as assumed or as an unnamed monster hunter who turns out to be him actually. His original arc is a caveman kept alive 10,000 years from a shard of an alien blood gem, which then is fused to his chest, which is another similarity to the way that the Bloodstone is attached to Ted later on in the film. So like the Infinity Stones, the Infinity Gems inside of the comics, the Infinity Stones are what they are known as inside of the MCU. Similarly, here we have a gem that now is called a stone inside the MCU. It's the same thing. Worn as a necklace, a powerful weapon of sorcery used to weaken monsters and reveal their true nature. Could this stone be a connection to the Infinity Stones as well, because of the fact that it's very old and this, as we see through the entirety of this movie, it weaves a lot of the chaos magic that we've come to know inside the MCU, interwoven in a bunch of different places all over inside of this story. So because of the fact that this is such an old relic, could it possibly have some ties to the Infinity Stones as well? We then see a drawing of the Bloodstone, which has a Latin inscription next to it, Lapis e Sanguine, which translated in Latin is bloodstone. Also pictured Sanguis Lapis Familia, which is basically the Bloodstone family. Herois Pagnivid Monsera ad Selenium Hominium. Monsters or demons saving humanity or saving humanity from monsters and demons. It's again a loose translation. In another image, we see 5 different monster hunters from across cultures in the same lunar pattern that we saw from before with the potential vampire monster from earlier. In the center, you will see Ulysses carrying the same weapon that Joven will find later on. There are also 5 invited hunters to tonight's festivities, Elsa making 6, although she wasn't invited. On the sides of this, we can see images with Latin under it that says, or that is translated, ritual with the cup of the moon on the left and an impaled monster on the right, which basically is the setup for the transferring of the Bloodstone. In this picture, we also see a waxing and waning crescent moons and waxing and waning gibbuses and a new moon, but no full moon, which signifies that someone somewhere in the side of the Bloodstone line understood that we should never do this on a full moon night. But what is slightly ironic and weird to me, well, maybe not weird, but interesting to me, is that the Bloodstone is in the same place where a new moon could go in that cycle. So this could be a foreshadowing of the fact that the Bloodstone has the power to change corrupted beings into their corrupted forms, which, by the way, in this case would be werewolf. The last image shows Ulysses dead, and we see Fortis et gratuity, strong and free, which is the Latin translation for that. On the right, we see Ulysses, son of Septis Bloodstone, was slain on the last full moon of the year and at the end of the bloodshed, which could mean that the former Bloodstone, or the Ulysses that just previously passed away, was a descendant of a long line of Ulysses, by the way, which is denoted by the fact that he is a son of Septis Bloodstone. And this also could mean that he was possibly slain by werewolf because of the fact that this happened on a full moon night. So did Jack kick all of this off just so he could come back and save his friend Ted? Maybe. As the final image cross dissolves into the next shot, or the similar shot with the moon pictured in it, still don't see a full moon, which Jack denotes that there is at least 5 days for the next one. As the door rises, we see the medallion that Jack is holding that he then puts on just to blend in later on. So Jack Russell in the comics is born Jacob Rusoff, son of a Transylvanian woman with an ancestral curse, which dates back to Dracula's werewolf in the 18th century. A curse reawakened by the Darkhold in the 20th century, first appearing in Marvel Comics in a Spotlight comic in 1972. Oh, and if you were looking for a earlier reference to Werewolf by Night, it happened in the MCU inside of Moon Knight on episode 2. Werewolf by Night is featured inside of that episode on the bus that shows WBN 0032, which is a nod to Werewolf by Night issue 32, which features Moon Knight's first appearance. Jack Russell is played by Gael Garcia Bernal. The second time that this director and Bernal have worked together, previously working together on Disney and Pixar's Coco. Obviously, the director wrote the score to Coco, and Bernal was the voice and song actor voice and singing actor for Heck. Inside of this movie, we also see a nod to that Coco reference based on the fact that the same face paint is worn by many of the skulls inside of Coco, which Jack is also wearing as well. The entrance hallway is littered, or decorated as you could say, with a bunch of paintings of monster killings and a bunch of Latin. On the left side, Extremum Vitae Spiritum Idre, the end of life consumed spirit, a play on the giving up the ghost in Latin. A little bit further down the line there, Fure Pericula quae vident fugant, the wild beasts flee the dangers which they see. A little bit further down the line to that, and we can only really see this later inside of a later shot. Victoria aut mors, corcora ad ruinum vet rex. Victory or death, calling to kingdom, long live the king. Those are the translations for the left side. Right side, and here we go. Omnis un mand Nox Trunkid Trunkari. Okay. One night waits to shorten. A little bit farther down the line to that, homosum humani nil I me aluminum puto. Seen better in later shots during the fight that happens at the end of the movie. I am a human being. I consider nothing human alien to me, which is actually a quote from Pluto. And the last thing that we see as Jack is walking into the throne room, I guess you could call that, Monstrum nota res malet optima. A monster is nothing bad, it's the best. That's possibly what it says. Don't quote me though. Inside of the trophy room, we then see each monster slayer represented, or each monster slaying represented by a trophy head. Each head has a painting that is next to it depicting how the monster was actually killed. We also see a picture of Ulysses next to his casket, which also has a rifle and a sword right next to it, or right in front of it, which will be used in later parts of this, which we'll talk about in later parts of the video. So stick around. The music playing in the background is I Never Had a Chance, which kind of gives us an idea of the setting or the feel that this movie is trying to give us a setting for, or really to also depict the age of how long the Bloodstone family has actually been alive as well. Possibly have a TVA sighting, but I'm not exactly sure here. When Elsa arrives, the Bloodstone then changes, or at least for us, the audience, it changes from black and white to a very bright and vibrant red color. Sort of denotes that Elsa is the rightful owner of the Bloodstone, but it's still the festivities or the ritual of passing it down still has to happen the way that it usually does. This is also a stark contrast to WandaVision, where inside of WandaVision's commercials, specifically to Wanda, there were things that were in one particular commercial, the toaster commercial, where there was a light blinking on the toaster, but nothing else was colored in. This is very similar to things that have gone on inside of Hollywood, specifically from Spielberg in the Schindler's List and a bunch of other places inside of the MCU, specifically inside of WandaVision. Obviously, episodes 2 and 3 were a big part of that because the entirety of Westview, or seemingly what Westview we thought Westview was, everything in there was turned black and white. And then as it changed inside of those 2 episodes, then we started to see that there's a breaking happening. And we also saw the same thing at the end with Elsa. Jack says, "I can almost smell the blood on your hands," which is a nod to Jack being a werewolf or having heightened senses because of his werewolf abilities when he says this to Joven. Joven, by the way, is played by Kirk Thatcher, who also appeared inside of Spider-Man Homecoming as the boombox punk, which he also slightly reprised, which he played earlier a similar role inside of Star Wars. His warmness is a part of his deception when he's talking to Jack, basically because he's the first person that Joven tries to kill. Jack, that is. They then make mention of the goblin monster that we saw in pictures earlier. Jack says that he has a history of fighting this monster. The first monster we saw in the opening. Interesting that this history with Jack Russell, because of the fact that this monster was transformed by being corrupted, similar to the way that Jack transforms and is not necessarily a monster all the time. Barusa then lists the kill count for each killer. So 26 for Baruso, 37 for Azul, 43 for Leorn, 56 for Joven, and 100 plus for Jack, which possibly means that he was doing a lot of his monster slaying while also being werewolf at the same time and cloaking himself as a monster killer while wearing his medallion. That then means that he possibly had been doing this for up to 8+ years, possibly 10, 9, somewhere around there. But it's been a long time that he's been doing this. Notice how each monster hunter wears their medallion while sitting in the trophy room, specifically depicting that they belong there or saying that this is what you're supposed to do to belong here. But Elsa does not, as she parted ways with hers a long time ago. And I love how the Bloodstone almost jumps out at us as if it were so eager to pop out into this reality, basically trying to tell us that this black and white is a nightmare or some form of that, or someone in this story is living this nightmare, and we're seeing this play out. And there's a part that's breaking through that fourth wall that we can then see, and that happens to be an inanimate object, in this case the Bloodstone. As Jack is walking into the maze, the hunters behind him say, "We spilled the blood of the hunt, or spill the blood of the hunt for the stone, and creed for those who forged our own blade," which possibly is a nod to Blade, but we can't say that for sure because the directing crew decided not to put him in this, but we all know that he's coming sometime soon. They then continue on to rid this land of its abominations. There is no peace without blood, and so it shall be. The monster hunting does involve Blade in Marvel lore, but this film does not include him inside of it. So just saying, everything inside of the MCU in terms of vampires, monsters, and all that kind of stuff, all of it pertains to Blade, but in this film, he is not in it. Jack makes his way into the maze. We can see Man-Thing's shadow as we kind of pan up a little bit. If you look closely, you can see his shadow. The entirety of this plot comes from the Minotaur in the Labyrinth, which this plot turns that on its head, and instead of Man-Thing being something that we should fear, we then find out that he is someone that we should probably help and help escape, or possibly come to love at the same time. Jack initially wanders inside the maze almost into Man-Thing inside of a single 40-second clip, which he approaches the hedges where Ted is hiding, but because of another hunter being blown in, he then walks away from that. Joven then attacks, and a Q mark is symbol and a cue mark we can then see at the top right of the screen, which usually would symbolize in olden days of filmmaking the changing of a scene. But in this case, this is a changing of a act or something of that nature inside of this movie, which for this particular situation, we're changing from act 1 to act 2. And we then do the same thing when Verussa captures Jack, and we start scene 3 at that point. Elsa follows a steamy footprint into a mausoleum, which means that Man-Thing chased Leon into the mausoleum. Elsa fights him through the door and cuts his arm off, which is a MCU gag that has started back in phase 1, I believe. She then uses his own weapon to kill him and struggles to cover his mouth to keep him silent when Joven appears and then wields the axe after. A jump scare between Jack and Man-Thing happens, but is a delightful moment that we find out afterwards because of the friendship that they have. But this Jurassic Park style jump scare is turned into a heartfelt moment. Man-Thing is then seen through the bushes, and if you don't know anything about Man-Thing, he in the comics was Dr. Ted Sallis, a scientist, a part of a team looking to recreate the super soldier serum. He gets caught by AIM, which actually he gets caught by AIM specifically through his wife giving him up, and injects himself with the serum and crashes his car into the wood. Mystic forces from the nexus of all realities transform Ted into Man-Thing after that. So the full breakdown on Man-Thing is he is a plant matter humanoid, senses emotion, enraged by fear, then burns those who feel fear and burns them due to the secretion of acid, a being that is spawned from the multiverse, specifically in the MCU. He's performed by Carrie Jones, who recently appeared in Boba Fett and is additionally voiced by longtime Marvel editor Jeffrey Ford. Ted may have been captured by a few different task forces over the course of time, which could have include the DODC, Stake, MI13, Blade, even. Man-Thing, what are you doing, bro? Jack then locks himself inside of the crypt with Elsa. We then see names of crew or friends of the production. Jack makes mention to how family follows us like an atmosphere. Elsa's father saw more specifically, the reason why we see everything in black and white is because of Elsa's father, who saw everything in black and white, or basically no gray area at all. It was either yes or no, black or white. Elsa then smashes her aunt's coffin marquee and recites, "She was Marvel Zombies, anyone?" Jack then advises Elsa about Man-Thing. Joven gets fried because he feels fear. Elsa calls Man-Thing by his name and softens him, which we then see through his eyes, calling him by his name, Ted. Jack then blows the wall up, allowing Man-Thing to escape, allowing Elsa to grab the Bloodstone from his back using a clamp. And then Jack tries to grab the stone as well and gets burned by it, which is a connection to the Wizard of Oz, similar to the way Dorothy or no one but Dorothy could wear the red slippers. And then Jack gets captured. Jack then apologizes to Elsa, and he then realizes that Verussa is going to use the Bloodstone to change him into his werewolf form. So you can see him looking through the throne room or through the trophy room for places to perch or dark spots to hide or hiding spots when he does actually transform. But to the audience, it seems as though he's in his head saying, "I'm going to be next on that wall." But that's not exactly what he's doing. Jack then warns Elsa to keep eye contact no matter what, and then proceeds to smell her body, which the eye contact thing is basically how canines perceive dominance, and smell is how they perceive the world. So he tells her exactly what he's going to be doing, and when the time comes, she doesn't break the eye contact, and she also shows him affection, which then breaks the werewolf transformation. And for me, that looks like a lullaby, which to me also symbolizes or possibly is a nod to the lullaby of Hulk and Black Widow. We also earlier saw a roundhouse kick from Elsa, which I've only seen from one other character. Elsa asks, does it work? And Jack just responds that yes, once. Jack has had a few lovers in the comics, Roxana at one point, and then an affair with Martine Bancroft, Morbius's ex. Marusa changes Jack afterwards, and a long take happens at this point, which we then see a staple inside of the MCU, which again is a long shot of Elsa, but in the background we still see Jack changing in front of us. This is not a cutscene at all. This actually happened in real time on the production set. The way that they probably pulled this off is by putting Jack right next to the strobe light and then his stunt double very close near him, and as he's moving away from it, then the stunt double moves directly into it, closer though to seem like he's right in front of Elsa. The Bloodstone then gives off this radiant or whatever to symbolize that it's done doing what it's doing, and Jack then escapes, going directly to the hiding place that we saw, or one of the hiding places that he was looking for, and we only are able to see him through his eyes when the camera pans up, which is a nod to the way that earlier horror films in black and white used to do so with prostheses. As he jumps down, he then proceeds to wreak havoc, and we then get a crane shot of Jack in his werewolf form, and again see him with his glowing eyes, again a nod to earlier horror film. We then get this really cool shot of Jack in his werewolf form, but in this case it is a full-on bloodbath that he breaks open someone's stomach, and inside of that scene we also get to see that bloodshed, or the blood running down the camera at the same speed that the door is closing behind him. We also see that Jack makes a conscious decision not to escape, because he could have several times in this scene, but bloodthirst is now full in rage and he is not giving up any of it that is in that room. So he's fully engaged in whatever is going on. Elsa then uses her father's sword to slay Azrael, the most brutal of deaths inside the MCU that I can think of to date. After Elsa pulls Verusa away from Jack, Jack then pounces on her and she doesn't break eye contact, which again is to symbolize that she understands and is peering into, and for me is a lullaby way of taking him away from his transformation. Verusa then lifts the rifle, and Man-Thing jumps straight down from the roof and fries her. Man-Thing then throws her fried corpse around the room, and heads then roll. The Bloodstone then turns her jacket into a Technicolor, which this is the first pop of color besides the Bloodstone, and it's the only time that we see a character fully in Technicolor at this point, because she is the rightful owner of the Bloodstone. But we also get a fade into Jack going into his hiding spot, which is a cross between the lullaby of Hulk and Black Widow and the Wizard of Oz. With an ironic twist here, we get the changing of Dorothy's homecoming, which basically in the Wizard of Oz was a changing from Technicolor to sepia. In this film, we see Elsa's nightmare turning from black and white to Technicolor in this case. This is basically the way that the MCU has shown the changing of or how really film in general shows the importance for a particular character and their role when black and white and color mix together. And after that, we only get color for the remaining of these scenes. in that same situation, we saw the same type of feel with WandaVision, where Wanda changed everything to black and white. And then once chaos magic, or Wanda completely woke up out of her nightmare or dream, as it would be if we are going back to multiverse of madness in this case, she then wakes up and turns everything back to Technicolor. So could this possibly be a foreshadowing that the chaos magic, or the relic that is the Bloodstone, is a tie to chaos magic, Wanda, the reality stone, all of it? Could it possibly be that there's a plumb line throughout the MCU of some sort somewhere? Maybe that this stone, plethora of stones, if there are multiple of them somewhere in the atmosphere, possibly this may come up later on. And I'm almost 90% sure that we will definitely see something of this inside of the new Agatha project, future Wanda projects, and anything else that could possibly have anything to do with chaos magic. So these are all of the things that I found inside of the Werewolf by Night series. What did you think? What did you find? And did you find anything that I missed? Leave that down in the comment section below. And until then, blurred out.